Okay, Jack.
Hello, and welcome to our second webinar in a series of webinars that the Michigan Coaching Program is sponsoring this fall. Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Brian Supotz of Advantage Strength and Conditioning. He's going to talk to us about developing physical literacy in your players. This is a subject that we don't get into a great deal during our coaching education clinics, and it's a super important topic that we need to make sure we're working with and making the best athletes out of our players. So with that, I'll turn it over to Brian. Brian, it's all yours.
All right. Let me get sharing here. All right. Everything seem okay, Jack?
Yes, looks good.
Okay. Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody. And like Jack said, my name is Brian Supotz, and the place you see behind me here is called Advantage Strength and Conditioning. It's in Ann Arbor. This is a place that I started when I was first done with my playing career, with the idea of developing young players, and the training side was something that always really interested me. It's kind of why I had a job for as long as I did, because you know, my conditioning, my strength, and all of that allowed me to play longer in the game than maybe my skill would have. But I love presenting about off-ice conditioning. It's my passion. I love sharing with the coaches community because, you know, you are donating your time, and you are, you know, in the business of developing our young players, and off-ice conditioning is part of that. And so this is something I've done quite often for USA Hockey. Tonight's going to be a little bit different. Obviously, this will be my first webinar, but we are going to go through the off-ice essentials, and we're going to do the COVID edition. So things are different. Things are different now. Before we get into everything, I want to say thank you for joining us. I know possibly you've already been on Zoom for 8 hours today, so I do thank you for sitting down and checking this out. And if you're watching the recording, thank you for taking about an hour out of your day to check this out. My goal is going to be to bring to you useful things that you can start using right away with your teams, with your young athletes, and with you know, anybody that you're developing, any young player that you're developing. Just to give you an idea of where I'm coming from, I went to high school and played high school hockey at Culver Military Academy in Indiana. From there, I went to Miami, so not a real traditional route for me. While I was at Miami, I was drafted by the Atlanta Thrashers, and then played professionally mostly with the Chicago Wolves, and I was in Atlanta and Columbus long enough to get a jersey with my name on it. But that's about it. Once I was done playing, I settled back here in Ann Arbor with my family, and opened a place called Advantage Strength and Conditioning, which you're looking at now. I also joined and became a part of this website called hockeystrengthandconditioning.com, which as of the last couple weeks has been changed into the Strength Coaches Association of Pro Hockey. So it's now kind of the platform for all of the NHL and American League strength coaches to put their information out and to, I guess, give themselves a platform. So that's been a really cool transition there. But really, this is what keeps me busy here in Ann Arbor, brick and mortar business, which is, you know, pretty challenging right now, but fortunately we are in a pretty good spot. So, and the kids have come back strong. There's more youth training now than ever before, I think. So things are good here. Now let's get into some stuff, right? So frequently asked questions. These are the questions that I put out kind of feelers a couple weeks ago just to see, you know, what people are most interested in right now. Like I said, I've done enough of these at live clinics, but things are definitely different now, and there are more challenges now than ever before. And so the same questions keep coming up. We notice the same things that keep coming up. So we're going to make sure we address those today. Things like, when should a kid start lifting? How many times a week should they lift? Doesn't lifting damage growth plates? That's something that's out there. It's something that a lot of people are really concerned about. How much weight should they be using? Should they lift during the season? Should they be doing like cardio stuff to stay in shape? How do we improve foot speed? What do we do for warm up? What's the best pregame meal? What should we be doing at home? And then one we get a lot is, how do you train kids? You know, when you have a team where you have athleticism that's here and athleticism at the way other end of the spectrum, how do you get a good workout for everybody on the team? And then obviously the biggest question right now, how can I help my players this season, right now, in the midst of COVID and all the things that we're doing to reduce risk and all of that? So how can we even do this right now? Because a lot of the things we used to do are out, right? So the challenges we already had with off-ice training were things like logistics. You know, how do we fit this into our schedule? Do we do it right before practice? Do we make it another day another trip to the rink? Lack of time, you know, like if you have a 5:30 practice, you definitely can't do it before practice because people will never make it. And so you have to consider that cost. If you're training at a place like this, there's a cost associated with that. If you hire a professional, you don't have equipment that you're dragging around to the rink, especially now that use of the rink is essentially none. And then maybe you're just plain sure not sure what to do, right? So we have all of those challenges, and that's what we're usually dealing with. Now we have the additional challenges of kids can't touch each other, they can't be within 6 feet of each other. They're wearing masks. A lot of rinks won't let you use the hallways anymore. You don't have use of that space. You can't share items. So even if you have, you know, tennis balls or a few weights or something like that, the challenge is now figuring out how you can create a workout or how you can do off ice with these limitations. And so it is tough. But today, I want to give you the tools and the know-how to figure out how to put a program together for your kids that it's going to be enjoyable for them, that they're going to buy into, that they're going to enjoy, and you know, something that's going to help them improve throughout the season. Additionally, we're also going to try to comply with rink regulations. Most rinks that I've been in are going to, you know, you've got 15 minutes before and maybe 15 minutes after, and then you're out the door. And obviously, we also want to keep our kids healthy too. So we want to make sure we're doing things that are responsible and also correct in terms of training. All right, so what we do know is that the environment has changed. So the environment that we have to operate in has changed, but the developmental needs have not. The developmental needs of kids are the same, if not maybe even a little bit more dire than they were before all of this hit. So here's the situation. This is what's going on with our athletes today. Recreational athletes, we're seeing poor vestibular function. So if you think of, you know, the vestibular system is sort of responsible for your balance. Okay, so if you think of a slush bucket inside your brain, and every time you move around, there's little hairs that read how the water is slushing around in there. Okay, that's actually in your inner ear. And so we have kids who aren't translating that well, whether it's because of poor head posture. Head posture rolls forward. This forward head posture can tend to throw off balance and things in the inner ear. There's a lot of coordination and proprioception issues that come along with it. So this inner ear function is diminishing in our young athletes, especially in recreational athletes or kids who aren't particularly athletically inclined. The lack of physical play, so the lack of like going out and climbing trees and playing a game of pickup baseball or soccer with friends, that's kind of turning kids into bigger kids with less strength. And so that's something that we're contending with too. And I'm sure if you think about your teams, everybody can think of an athlete who is maybe big for his age or her age, doesn't necessarily have the strength to handle that body weight. And so it comes out in maybe some straight-legged skating, or just doesn't have the core strength to hold positions or whatever it might be. And then we also have the one that's kind of not thought of all that often, but there's also a narrowing visual field. And so when you have this narrowing visual field in a game like hockey, you can imagine how dangerous that is, where it affects performance, and it's going to be a hazard on the ice. If you used to be able to see everything out to the side, maybe to 180 degrees, you can see players coming at you, you can see plays to make. But with this narrowing visual field, which they usually say is because of more focused screen time or focusing on small devices in front of the kids in front of them. So they say that a lot of that is causing a narrowing visual field. Okay, so that's something that's going on with everybody. And now on the other side of that, we have these elites who are, maybe we'll call it like the AAAs or the super AAAs or whatever you want to call it, where you're traveling all over the country at 10 years old or 12 years old. And what we're seeing there are first, the effects of early sports specialization. So we call it improper wiring or incomplete wiring. These are good hockey players who are not great athletes. So they can do one thing and they do one thing well. And we'll talk a little bit later about why that's an issue. Burnout, that usually doesn't set in until later, like early teens. I think everybody knows somebody who was an unbelievable player at age 9, 10, 11, 12, and then started to fade away. And then you find them not really enjoying hockey anymore. So that's an issue. Overuse injuries, groin injuries, low abdominal injuries, which is kind of a combination of overuse and lack of strength. So we see two things playing together there. And you know, the kids are sometimes called big vehicles with poor suspension. So kids are getting overall bigger and bigger. And, you know, in an agile game like hockey, a sprinting game, a cutting game like hockey, the suspension and the overall strength just isn't there to move these athletes. So you get really big kids who don't move all that well. On top of all that, we've got some direct effects that are happening right now with COVID. On the negative side, organized sports have been put on hold. So kids, especially kids in that 12-year-old age range, 11, 12, 13, and that what the ADM would call the golden age of skill development, are now left without instruction. They're left without a year to practice. Okay, so that could be an issue. Some kids may lose momentum or interest in a sport. You know, if it's something you've always done and you just kept going and going, a break like this might make kids realize, hey, maybe I don't really like hockey, or maybe I really don't like soccer, right? And that could be good or bad. Potential economic strains. So families may not be able to keep kids in sports because of economic situations. And maybe the most unfortunate one is that practice time, what might have been practice time before, I think everybody saw their pace of life slow way down, especially during all of the quarantine. And then the screen time crept in. And so now maybe practice time has been replaced by screen time. On the positive side, what we might see, and this is all speculation on my part, there's no data to back this up, but we may see the opportunity to get back to some unstructured play, which is something that we've been talking about a lot, leading up to this. And just the need to go out and play, go out and have fun, go out, be kids, be active, do something where you're moving around, ride bikes, go fishing, climb trees, all of that, and maybe play some pickup hockey. We might see more varied activities, or we might see kids getting more creative because they're being forced to use their time differently. And I think one of the other positives of this is the temporary, I'm sure it'll all come flying back, but the temporarily deprofessionalization of youth sports. So, that time off, I think, let kids be kids a little bit. And we are getting back into the grind now. But just, I think it's important to let kids be kids and do other activities that they would otherwise be doing if they weren't consumed by a hockey schedule. So we may have some good and bad there. What we do know, though, is off-ice development is more important now than ever before, because we do want to develop athletes who happen to play hockey. And that is, it's in the interest of the kids. These are kids who are going to have more interest in sports growing up or when they get older, and more interest in fitness as they get older, rather than having a moderate experience with hockey and not really being able to do anything else. Maybe they don't pick anything else up. Maybe they live more sedentary lifestyle as they get older. But we want to develop athletes who are getting success in sports and in athletics across the board. So there's a lot of questions about hockey specific training. What hockey specific exercises should I be doing? It's in our field, it's pretty commonly known. This is something that this pyramid exists, but I think it's being shifted down farther and farther. But from 0 to 10 years old, we want to focus on this subject called physical literacy. So if you think of, reading would be literacy. If you can read, you're literate. Physical literacy is knowing the basics, the fundamental movement patterns, skipping, jogging, arms and legs in opposition, shuffling, being nice and light on your feet. If you ever take your team through a warm-up, you can spot the kids who don't have this really good base. I see it all the time, even at the AAA level. There are kids skipping with the same arm and leg up in the air like this, like they're tied together. And I don't know where that comes from, but it happens quite a bit. Doesn't feel natural to me, but these are the things that need to be in place before we get into more sports training, and especially before we get into hockey specific training. So that 0 to 10 years old is really, I think it's next year. Yeah. So we're looking at active start and fundamentals, really getting kids interested in moving around. So when coaches ask me what they should be doing for off ice for their 8 or 9-year-old team, I would say skip, shuffle, march, karaoke, and that would be like a warm up for off ice. And then your off ice might be a game of tag, or well, that would have been before all this. I'd have to rethink it in the COVID era, but it might be a game of tag. It might be ultimate frisbee. It might be a game of keep away with a tennis ball. So we want kids to get interested and have fun at these off ice sessions, so that when they get older and their coach says, hey, we have off ice, it's not like oh man, we've been doing this forever. It's more of like cool, what are we doing today? All right, so going back about 10 to 16 years old, we're going to start more sports training, just general strength. So learning how to squat, learning how to lunge, learning how to do a lateral squat. And we're not necessarily going to be training to develop muscles at that point, because for 90%, all but the earliest of early matures, developing muscle isn't really going to happen at this stage. We're more creating coordination. We're getting kids used to their body. We're getting kids used to the idea of using their body weight for training, and also maybe using some external weight or some external load for training. And so that's sports training, and that corresponds here. So this chart, if you haven't seen this, I know it's impossible to read. If you haven't seen this, it's straight out of the ADM, but these are the stages of development. And so now when you get into that sport training, not hockey specific, but more sports specific training, we're into the learn to train and train to train. So we're training with a purpose. Most team sports are power based. So we're thinking, how do we teach these athletes how to be explosive, powerful? So a lot of it is going to revolve around running, jumping, or sprinting, I should say, jumping, throwing, that kind of stuff. So that's all the sports specific. Now, hockey specific training to me is like skill work, stick handling, skating. I think those are all the things that should come in that 16 and older age range. I think it's okay to be a late bloomer in that. I know it's hard to say that because of how early things happen. You sort of have to jump on the train early. At least that's the impression. Doesn't always work out that way, but I think the hockey specific training is a bit more skill work. I think for what we do in here, we have youth groups that we might have a lacrosse player, a soccer player, 2 baseball players, and 2 hockey players. And they're all in the same program, and they're all benefiting from the same program. And they're either hitting the ball farther, skating faster, winning more head balls in the box. Right. So that's sports training. And then hockey specific, like I said, is more skill based. So for us, physical literacy is mastering the fundamental movement patterns. Can they move well? Can they have awareness of their body? And can they respond to coaching, right? There's always those kids that you say bend their knees and it's like they don't know what that means. And then the other thing we want to develop in creating that good solid base of physical literacy is confidence and interest in active pursuits. So are they going to be interested in doing things when they're older, right? Because the percentages are not friendly in terms of making it to the NHL. So it would be of our best interest to play the odds and make sure we're developing athletes who are interested in doing other stuff as well. So we'll go through just some body systems here, and I think I'll breeze through this pretty quickly. This is what's going on when we're developing athletes rather than just training hockey players. And so we can shape our training in a way that develops all these things to where we don't have to like explicitly coach this. So body awareness in physical education, if you were like a phys ed teacher, in your phys ed book, it would say understanding the parts of the body and how they move. But in hockey, what it looks like are kids that can bend their knees, kids who understand coaching when you say something like, if you say you shouldn't be swinging your arm across your body there, they get that and can move their arms forward and backward. They can also turn their shoulders and keep their feet going straight ahead, so it's just being aware of the body, keeping their toes facing forward and turning, which is, key in hockey if you're going to be, turning, passing, shooting, all those things. All right, so that's body awareness. Directional awareness is basically just differentiating right from left, forward and backward. What it means in hockey is players who understand their position, players who understand how to get to, like, do I have enough space? Do I have enough, room to get into a little spot where I can get a pass? They can make a pass to a target that maybe isn't there yet, maybe an area pass. All right, so that's understanding direction. Spatial awareness, how big is this area? The classic like mini mite drill is you put them all in a circle and have them skate around, and you see them bumping into each other. They always, bump into each other, fall down. And you're like wondering, did they not see that? But it's something, spatial awareness is something that develops. And, when you start to see somebody closing in, a little bit as you get older, as this spatial awareness develops, you have a better idea of how long do I have before I have to get out of the way? When do I need to move? How much do I need to move? And so a hockey player with great spatial awareness is maybe a goalie that knows how to stay big and take up as much space as possible in the net. A player who decides to squeeze through the defender and the boards when a hip check is coming. Do I have enough space? Do I have enough time to get through there? And maybe just getting through a bunch of players to get to the person you're supposed to be defending. So that's spatial awareness. Temporal awareness, it's just rhythm and timing. The jump roping skill of, like, I would say average athletes even, is pretty rough right now. If you have a group of kids jump rope, there's quite a few who can't, even at the 10, 12, 14-year-old level. And so that temporal awareness isn't being developed very well right now. But the things in hockey that are temporal, that have rhythm and timing associated with them, are stick handling, skating and stick handling particularly. So we need that sense of timing for that. Visual awareness, how keen is a player's vision? Can they catch things right out of the corner? Can they catch things out of the corner of their eye? That visual field that we talked about. Can they react quickly to a puck and make the correct adjustments for it? That's just, developing the visual system. The vestibular system we talked about earlier, that's balance. Players who have better balance can turn tighter, deke better, maybe check better, harder, because they understand their center of mass. They understand their balance. They escape checks better because if a player is leaning on them, they're able to keep their balance and turn away. Proprioception is understanding where your body parts are even when you can't see them. And so that's crucial in hockey. And that would extend to understanding where the blade of the stick is, even if you're not staring at the puck. So that's proprioception, just being able to, if you were able to close your eyes and touch your fingers together. Auditory awareness, just picking up auditory cues. Tactile awareness, what does that feel like? You know, like I said, a player leaning on you or feeling a tug on your arm. All of those things have to be developed. And really what we're doing with these athletes, obviously, if we took every one of those and tried to develop each one individually, you'd never get there. You'd never get there because there's too much there, and there's too much crossover. In a lot of the games and activities that you're going to see in a little bit, we have a lot of crossover. You could say that this one develops tactile, vestibular, and rhythm and timing, right? So really what we're doing at this point is wiring the brain to be more athletic, to react to situations, to understand and get a better feel for all these situations. So the more of this off-ice training you can do, the more wiring of your athlete's brain that you're going to do without just coaching hockey, right? Because, you know, I'm a big multi-sport guy. Like I urge other kids to play other sports. My son is playing 2 other sports besides hockey right now, all because I think there's just so much that goes into, you know, a give and go in soccer is the same as a give and go in hockey, right? And the idea is the same for all the sports, or all the team sports, essentially. I'll get to that in a little bit. So one solution maybe is, you know, we're dealing with all these roadblocks right now, and we've got, you know, 3 practices a week already. Asking parents to come to a 4th day maybe is pretty tough, but we've got to get this off-ice training in. So one solution that we propose is a 20 to 30-minute session at the rink. Now, that's got to change a little bit, maybe, if your rink isn't into it. I mean, the Swedish kids go outside all the time. The Finnish kids, like Jack said, the Swedish and Finnish kids go outside for their off-ice all year round. So I don't think it's unheard of. I think it could be done in the right setting, but we need minimal equipment, right? Because a coach shouldn't be expected. You're already doing enough. You shouldn't be expected to haul around your weight collection with you. We want to do something that's age appropriate and something that's going to be a good training methodology, so that we're training the correct things, so that we're developing the right things. So good training is consistent. You know, there's always, the question always comes up. I could have put this in the frequently asked questions. How many times a week should we train? And I say as much as possible. A 20-minute session is better than, you know, if you have 3 practices a week, instead of adding a 4th practice and making it this gut-busting 1-hour workout, 3 20-minute sessions throughout the week are doing more for your athletes than that one really tough session. And so the graph, what we see here is kind of, it's basically the effects of training. So when you train and you get tired, right? So you're following the curve down and to the right. So that is performance, right? So you get tired as you train, you get tired and your performance goes down. But then after the training session, your body starts to recover. And what happens is you recover to a level that's higher than you were at before. That's just like strength training, right? I think everybody has a pretty good feel for that. If you lift a weight for a while, eventually that weight's going to feel easy and you can try the next weight, right? That's what we're seeing happening here, where you're just seeing small incremental increases in performance. And that happens every time you train, for the most part. So consistency is more important than intensity. We want to make sure that the things that we're doing are developmentally appropriate. So if you have a group of 12-year-olds and you're trying to make them all bodybuilders, you're not going to get what you're hoping for, because they're just not biologically ready to create muscle. Okay, so it helps to know a little bit about where the kids are in their developmental path. Obviously, everybody's going to be different if you're dealing with a team. But what you'll notice is the girls are maturing quicker physically. And so their windows are shifted back to the left a little bit farther than the guys, right? So girls reach their peak height velocity when they're growing the most, just shy of 13 years old. Boys are more like 13 and a half or 14. And so all of these skills can be developed at a little bit different time for guys and girls. Now, when you see, let's take guys and stamina, under that 12 to 15-year-old range. That's not to say that you can't develop anything else. This is to say that that is like everything else is going along the highway. Stamina is kind of the express lane, right? You jump in the express lane and boom, you can get places faster. So you can make more gains in stamina during that time frame than you could before it or after it, or the gains come faster. Okay, so knowing a little bit about this and when you can develop speed, when you can develop strength, is helpful. And this would be kind of more along the professional lines. But if you have a good idea that, we talked about that golden age of skill development between, right around 12 years old, or maybe 10 to 12, if you know that, then you can focus on skills and maybe have a heavier skill development theme in your training. From this is kind of a bad picture because it's a picture of a book. But what you'll notice is at the top there, it just goes age ranges, 5 to 8, 10, 8 to 10, 10 to 12. And what you'll notice is the first things that you can really develop are aerobic endurance and reaction time and coordination. Coordination is everything, right? If you think about back to that picture of the brain wiring in, if you have an uncoordinated athlete, this is the problem with not doing off-ice training. If you have an uncoordinated athlete, the circuits don't plug in real well, and the body doesn't move efficiently. So if they do try to get into training, if they do, maybe they do make, they're an excellent hockey player, but not a great athlete. Maybe they make the national team, something like that. And they do get into more structured strength training. Their body's not going to be plugged in. They're not going to have enough muscles plugged in to be a strong athlete, right? And that puts them at risk of injury and all these other things. So coordination is something that should be developed from as soon as a kid can walk going forward. And there's always an open window for that. Strength and like explosive strength don't really start until the armpit hair shows up. So, we can coordinate kids, and you'll see in a little bit here, we can help kids be more coordinated and understand landing from a jump or, creating power. But when the gains and the big jumps in that are going to start coming as they get older and their body is more biologically ready to do that. So a question we get a lot: what's the right amount of work? How much should they be lifting? All of this. So between the ages of 6 and 10, we're thinking body weight exercises and flexibility. So suppleness is one of those things, one of those windows that's open for kids. And I would say that we see some very poor flexibility. So it's something that kids can work on. So body weight exercises. And you're going to have kids that can lift more, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, body weight exercises with reps higher than 10 are going to be the best sort of prescription for 6 to 10-year-olds. Lots of games, lots of gameplay. We'll talk about that at the end, why that's so beneficial. Now, 11 to 14, we still want that same kind of training, but now we're going to add a little bit of resistance when the kids are ready. We should allow more than 10 repetitions, right? So we're not going to be having kids at 11 to 13 or 14 really struggling under any kind of weight. They should be able to flow through the movement. The last one should look just like the first one, and it should be more than 10 repetitions. So they're really coordinating the movement, but they shouldn't be grinding through those movements. And then team games and a lot, more gameplay, right? We'll talk more about that. Now, age 15 to 19, that's when the strength and power gains can really start to happen for kids. And so what we want is resistance that allows for fewer than 10 repetitions. And, I mentioned earlier that a lot of team sports are very similar in what their demands are. Most team sports are sprint-based sports. Even though, it seems like soccer is, you'd have to go out and run miles and miles and miles to be in shape for soccer. When you really watch it, and when you can look at analytics now, it's a sprint and a walk and a jog, a sprint, a walk, a sprint, a jog, right? So it's all over the place. So most team sports are a sprint sport. So we want to start to develop that with these athletes and develop that strength and less strength endurance. Like we don't need them to go for a minute or a minute and a half in a set, because it's not really what happens in organized sports or in team sports. That's when the interval training is going to start to come in, and they get into higher intensity, like heart rates up close to 200, that kind of stuff for short duration. So here's what we can do with the kids right now. And instead of saying in the rink, we'll say right outside the rink, because when your team is together, you should be doing something. When I walked into, we're at the Ann Arbor Ice Cube, so we're in the old USA training area up here. And so when I came to the rink tonight, there were teams out in the parking lot doing off ice. It was great. It was great to see. So I think these are things that we can do at the rink. We can definitely do body weight strength training. We can do plyometrics, which is jumping, hopping, bounding, that kind of stuff. Core training is really important right now. Sprinting, tag, cut, dodge, that kind of stuff. Some endurance, some conditioning type stuff, and also we can play games. I'm gonna skip over that. Body weight strength training. Typically, if we're presenting in a live version or in an in-person version here, at this point we have the coaches stand up, shake their legs out, because I want to go through this movement checklist, and it helps to break down where your kids are, where your athletes are in terms of their strength, and what you should prioritize to kind of build that solid base before we take on too much or throw too much at them. So number one thing would be, can you get into and hold the position? So we'll think of something really simple like a body weight squat. So if I was going to do a body weight squat, and I would encourage you to do the same thing right along with me here. If I was going to get into a body weight squat, number one thing for myself and for anybody that you're coaching, can I get into the position? Right? Can I get down and hold the position with good form? Getting thighs just about parallel to the ground, not having my knees cave in on each other, having shins that are vertical, all of these good form things, not with my chest facing the floor, but with my chest facing up. That's the first one. Can I check that box, right? And so let's say you do that with your team in the hallway or just outside the rink, and everybody can do this. Great. So you kind of have that. You know that you're at that level of strength basically for your team. Now, can you get into and out of the position with control? So could they do a body weight squat up and down with good form for, say, a set of 10 reps, where we don't see like knees collapsing in and things like that? Like if it looks like a bad squat, you can correct it, right? And so this is where, if you see a lot of bad squats, this is where you would say, you know what, I think this is about where we are in terms of our level, our ability level. The next step would be, let's say everybody on the team can get in and out of that position. All the squats look good. You make a few adjustments, but really at this point, you're patterning. You're helping kids understand the movement. All right, now, can you get into and out of the position with load? Could you do that same thing holding weight? Hold a weight up under your chin and do the same kind of squat and have it still look good, right? If you can do that, can you get into and out of the position with speed? So this would just be a jump, right? This would be, creating power. So like really starting to create power. But you could understand, like when we create power, we want to have a really solid base. So when you have that solid base at the bottom of the position, right? And then you start to do the movement with control, and then you can do it with load, more weight, you have a really good base from which to jump. So now you're going to be creating better power, which is, possibly better, or definitely better than just taking somebody who maybe isn't ready and starting to do those jumps right away. That's a pretty extreme example. I mean, I think kids can jump, but you can definitely help them achieve a better base for that jump. Now, can you get into and out of the position with speed repeatedly? So that's just conditioning, right? Could you do 30 seconds of squat jumps and then rest for 2 minutes and then do 30 seconds of squat jumps, right? So that's just the conditioning piece of it. That's when you would add that. So isometrics, this is that. Can you get into and hold the position? So these would be like some of the one leg variations, and this looks like, it's just a picture, but this is what the movement should look like. You can do these with your teams. It's an excellent way to build strength. It's also an excellent way to go around and make corrections, right? If you have somebody who is like, has their hands on their knees resting in that split squat, the one on the left there, you can go over and you can make corrections. You can help them get their chest up, or, you know, give them verbal instructions like that. And they're holding that position at the same time. So you can help them achieve that really good bottom position by making some adjustments and helping them along the way, and help them understand more about a good solid position, right? And so this sort of replaces the wall sits. I think, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, wall sits would be like a 3. I mean, it's something, but if you can get kids out in space to where they're using their muscles more functionally, the one on the right there is called a lateral squat, and that looks a lot like a hockey stride, right? So we can be a little bit more functional, I guess, and have, because in a wall sit, you don't use your glutes, you don't use your butt cheeks that often or that much, compared to this or like a bodyweight squat if you're just holding it off the wall. So we want to make sure that we're kind of doing the best we can with this, and so just stepping off the wall is a great way to improve a wall sit. All right, so these are videos from some things that we did with USA Hockey, and this is like a glute bridge hold, and so all he's got to do is hold this position nice and strong, and you can kind of see at the end he sort of flops down there. So this is maybe somebody that could benefit from more of this. You know, he's a pretty smooth, slick hockey player, good hands, skates pretty well, but in terms of athleticism, this can be better. All right, so we want him to be able to hold that position nice and strong, basically using his butt cheek and the back of his leg to hold that position. All right, same thing, lots of tension down the back of the leg here. It's almost like getting a hamstring stretch. And now we add a little bit of balance in also. So we're training some hip stability, we're training some balance, but it's also just a hold, right? And so we can hold muscles under tension and get some strength gains and some coordination gains out of it. Now, this would be number 2 on the checklist. Can you get in and out of the position, right? So if he were to just go down and hold, that would be an isometric. But now he's doing something more dynamic where he's going in and out of the movement. And, you know, staying, like keeping good form the whole time. This is similar. So this is just kind of the forward and backward version of the sideways squat that we saw a second ago. And again, you'll see a little bit more like effort than I'd like to see with these, and a few balance checks too, right? So this is somebody who's, this is good for, like, this is great. This is a perfect spot for him to be, because he'll learn through this, right? But you see a little extra effort and like a little extra hitch there to try to get going. So this is somebody who is going to stay right here with the body weight stuff. This is that same movement, just now with movement. Sorry, that didn't make much sense, did it? This is the same exercise, just with movement. Now, this is the more dynamic one. We did the hold, we saw the hold a couple slides ago. But this is a movement that we use a lot, usually with teenagers, we're using weight with this because it really develops good like hip strength, which we need for hockey. On this note, I'll bring up, is it bad for kids to lift heavy weights? It's not. It's bad for them to lift heavy weights if they're not prepared for it, right? So if you have somebody who's demonstrated that they can do a set of 10 of those split squats and look really good with it, it looks automatic for them, then hand them a 5-pound weight. If they can manage the 5-pound weight and you get the same results, everything looks good, hand them a 10-pound weight. And we work up until you find something where they're just barely getting it with good form, right, and decent speed. So the American Academy of Pediatrics has the position paper was a while ago, but they just brought it back up recently in June. And it's not that lifting weights damages growth plates or affects bone growth in any adverse way. It's the improper use of weight training that can do that. And so if you have somebody who's moving well, who's looking coordinated, who's feeling the exercise in the right areas, giving them weight and having them lift more weight is not an issue. It's the practice of, if things get if things get a little too intense, or it becomes like this 5-minute marathon of things, and they're just hacking away with bad movement patterns, then yes, there is the potential for injury. The name of the, I guess, technique is progressive overload. So you're just progressively giving them more weight and more weight. When they're ready for it, you give them more. All right. So the question is, did he do all the reps? Did they look good? All right, awesome. Give him more weight. And so what we'll say in here, if we're trying to get kids who haven't, who are new to an exercise or something, we'll tell them, do the most weight you can do well. And so that's the key, is making it look good. You'll notice in those, we did a lot of one leg movements. So a lot of split squats, a lot of lateral squats, a lot of one leg squats, or squats where your leg is elevated with only having one foot on the floor. So why one leg? You don't see, this doesn't look like a high school weight room where it's squats and deadlifts all the time, like traditional squats where the bar is on your back, or pulling the bar from the floor with 2 legs on the floor. So one leg, because if you look at sporting movements, if you look at athletic movements, everything's done. There are very, very, very few examples of athletic movements that are done with 2 legs doing the same thing at the same time, like they would in a squat or in like at a deadlift, right? And that's been the bulk of strength training, in any football program since the 80s. So when you look at sporting movements like Saquon with the side cut here, that looks a lot like a lateral squat. All right, Taylor Hall, this stride is a thing of beauty. Again, looks like a lateral squat, but one leg is doing one job and pushing, the other leg is stabilizing and holding his body up, right? So you have 2 legs doing different things at different times. And that's why we train on one leg. Everything's in opposition, okay? When the left arm drives forward, the right knee drives forward, right? So we don't want to train. There's actually, if you want to be a good squatter, okay, so here's another example of some rotation or some crossing over. So we'll do a lot of variations where kids are crossing over. So if you want to squat, if you want to be like a competitive squatter, then you have to squat. If you want to gain strength and build athleticism and a body that's going to endure different directions, different movements, and all of that, you can't have both feet glued to the ground when you do all of your strength training. Some people will squat as a part of their overall program, but still also do those one leg variations. But you have to do more than just squat if you're going to be developing young athletes, because this develops, like straight squatting like that develops squatters. And the only other sport that I can think of where 2 feet press at the same time doing the exact same job is in rowing, where your feet are strapped to the boat. Okay, so that's bodyweight strength training. Those are some things that you can do at the rink. And then you also know, you can go back and check it out. How old are your kids? How many reps should they be doing? And then, maybe they are ready to hold some weight or something like that. They can hold their hockey bag or whatever. Plyometrics, so jumping and developing lower body power. In the checklist, this would be number 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is kind of getting kids that jump, or that first step that a lot of parents will talk about, or a lot of coaches will talk about. You've got a quick first step. This is where this comes from. And our progression here, the most important thing is a landing skill, right? So we want kids to be able to land well, because if they can land well, then they'll be more confident in jumping higher or farther. The analogy is, how fast would you drive a car if you weren't so sure about the brakes, right? If you didn't have good brakes, you probably wouldn't drive all that fast. So landing skills, being able to put on the brakes, is something that's going to be injury prevention. It's also going to give them a great base for, to work off of to develop that power. This is less power, and this is just more kind of tuning the springs a little bit. So when it's kind of a coordination thing, right? They get a lot of those systems coming online that we talked about earlier in the session. Knowing how far to jump, knowing how high to jump, all of that kind of stuff. And this helps them get nice stiff ankles, nice stiff calves and lower legs, so that they can produce that power later on. There's a bunch of different line drills you can do. Again, this is less power and this is more body awareness. So I'm asking him to jump across the line and face back the other way. So now they have to determine how far do I have to jump, how much do I have to turn. So this is just less power development and more like body awareness. So now we start getting into more of the pure like plyometric stuff. And here you can see he's actually pretty springy for a 12-year-old. But what we're focused on is good solid landing, using the legs like springs to absorb shock when you land, right? And then we would get into, I guess, more bounding or springing type movements, right? So in sports, we go forward and backward. We also go side to side. So this is the side to side version of that. Okay, we want him to stick his landings. You can see him checking his balance there, correcting a little bit, which is good. These are all good like learning progressions for kids to go through. But pretty soon we would want him really bounding, you know, maybe 4 or 5 yards side to side there. Sprinting. Sprinting is something we can definitely do right now. It's one of the best things that you can do. It's sort of like a max effort, right? So if you go at a max effort, your brain will help you go faster. So that's why these sprint drills are great. And don't be afraid to give, actually you should give kids lots and lots of time in between sprints. So if you're doing sprints, there may only be one line, and then they walk around to the back and they rest for 2 minutes before a 6-second sprint or whatever it might be. Because if they're not going as fast as they can, if they're not going really fast, it's not really developing speed just yet, but it helps their brain understand developing power, pushing back on the floor, and really separating themselves from the goal line or the start line. This is a great way to do it, and you can still do this right now. You know, you would just have the kids a little bit farther apart probably. But this is a chase drill, so it works on reaction time and it works on foot positioning. This might also be a situation where a D is practicing turning and driving back with a defender who's driving around him. The footwork is really similar. And so the kids have fun with this. It's a great way for them to go fast. Like there's very few kids that won't sprint as fast as they possibly can here. So this is a great one that you can introduce to your kids right now, that you can do right now at the rink or just outside. All right, mirror. The blonde kid is trying to keep up with the dark-haired kid. So he's trying to keep his belly button even with Alex's belly button here, right? So there's some fakes. There's some reaction time here. There's a ton going on here. You're learning to read. You're getting that spatial awareness. And you can see at the end here, he's gassed, right? So they get something out of it, right? If you want to see kids tired, which isn't always the goal, this is a great way to do it because they have fun with it. They buy in. Everybody competes at this, and you get really good results from it. So I get asked a lot about fast feet, and this is Michael Flatley. Michael Flatley has very fast feet, so does everybody else on stage. But it's not always the goal. And I think when you look at the best skaters in the NHL, or you look at the fastest skaters, they don't have quick feet necessarily. They have big power. So they're able to push into the ice and separate, like push the ice away from themselves better than the other skaters. You look at somebody like Connor McDavid, or a guy that I played with, Braden Coburn, who looks like a gazelle on the ice. And he just, with every stride, takes up so much room that before you know it, he's on you, or he's there. He's beat somebody to the puck. So moving your feet fast and not producing power, not producing any kind of forward direction or lateral direction doesn't necessarily help out. So we'll use the speed ladder and those line drills and stuff for like warm up and that kind of thing, or to do different things. But to develop speed, sprinting and the plyometric stuff is the way to go, because it teaches athletes how to push the ground away from themselves and create distance, right? And so sometimes going through a speed ladder and a little tippy tap doesn't really do that. Cardio, really quickly. You know what? I'm gonna pass on this. Basically, the the general idea here, I want to keep this under an hour. The general idea here is every athlete has kind of muscles that help them jump and be explosive, and muscles that help them go for longer distances. So think of it as sprinter and marathon runner. There's also a third kind of muscle that can be swayed either way, right? So if you go, and maybe if you've coached kids at the higher levels and maybe the higher recreational levels, you'll get kids from cross country and you think like, wow, great, they're going to be in great shape. You know, this is going to be great. They'll walk right into the season, and they come back and they're really slow. Or swimmers are the same thing. And you're like, well, they should be in great shape. Why aren't they very fast? Because when they've done all the training for cross country, all those muscles, like the muscles that can be developed, start to train and take on the characteristics of those slow twitch or the marathon muscles. So when we do cardio is kind of like a heart rate zone. So think of it as intervals. You go out and do your interval and you come back. Once your heart rate gets to a certain level, you would go again, right? And so you can gain cardio, like you can get better cardio by doing sprints. And at the same time, you're also collecting as many of those trainable fiber types over to the fast twitch or the power side, so that now you have an athlete that is going to be explosive and in good shape. Cardio is important because it is, when you get back to the bench, the better your cardio system, the better your battery recharges before you go out to your next shift. So it is important. The best way for kids 6 to 10 to get cardio, go out and play something. Go play soccer, go play ultimate frisbee, run around with the ball, play tag, get out of breath, get sweaty. That's how you do cardio for kids 6 to 10. 10 to maybe 16, you start getting into some more interval-based things. And then 16 on up, you're doing intervals, like conditioning. Run for 30 seconds or go like a 150-yard shuttle and rest for 3 or 4 minutes, right? So that's how we get that cardio system going. Core training is not what it used to be. It's no longer sit-ups and side bends. Now it's looking more like planks, and I'm going to skip the explanation here, but really what you should know is the function of the core is to transfer power from the legs to the upper body. So if you do all this leg training and you get really strong in your lower body, but you have a weak core, now you've developed a bunch of energy with your legs, but it leaks out through your core. Like it doesn't get transferred to your shoulders and your arms and your hands. So Steven Stamkos is not a big guy, but he has a big shot because he can put all of his lower body power into the stick and into the puck, right? So our goal with core training should be to eliminate any extra wobbling around or energy leaks that come out of the core. So here's some plank variations you can do with your team. You'll notice a big sway in my back there. Okay, we want to fix that, get the tailbones pointed down at the ground. Now it looks less like a hammock. So now we just hold. You can do that at a hold for about 30 seconds. You can take away one part of support and just slide that hand out and try to have them hold steady through that whole thing. You can go elbows to hands, and the visualization here would be have them imagine balancing a glass of water in their low back. They're trying not to spill that. So those are some variations that you can go through with your team that are really simple. You can do them in the grass, outside. You can do them in the rink if you're allowed, and you can be far apart while you do this kind of stuff. So it's really easy to get a team in a hallway and do it. Side planks, just as important as the front, right? We want to make sure that we're training in different planes. So not only do we get the front, we get the sides. And with this next one, it's an anti-rotation. So what they're doing is actually pressing into each other's hands. This one is probably out for right now, but what you can do is find any vertical surface like a corner and put your arms out straight and turn into the corner. Obviously, you're not going to be pushing the wall over, but you'll be using this to create that pressure into the wall. And that's a good way to develop that anti-rotation. So all of our core movements are antis, meaning non-movements. Gameplay. This is something that USA Hockey was onto a decade ago. It's probably 12, 15 years ago now. but playing games, and this would be like small area games, is the way to create an instinct, create an experience that trains an instinct, right? So when you're in a small area and you're forced to, move the puck or protect the puck or whatever, it tells you more than a coach could ever tell you, right? So games are a great way to set up a learning environment where the coach doesn't have to do all the coaching. So I'm going to go back here. Why are games so engaging for kids? Why are they fun? And I'll tell you this, with the high school team, I have them wear heart rate monitors. And this is a player who isn't particularly driven in the gym. But on this day, he spent 16 minutes in the red, which is, above 175 beats per minute for this guy. And so he was like really going most of the time. And then usually I would say his heart rate stuff looks flipped, right? It looks like more gray than red for sure. But on this day, he was really competing. This happened to be a day that we were playing ultimate frisbee. So while he doesn't get into training here in the gym, he gets fired up about ultimate frisbee and competing, right? So when you're playing a game, you can get into this flow state that makes things a little bit more fun. I would explain that a little bit more, but I think the idea is get into a flow state where if the challenge kind of matches your skill in a certain thing, then it makes it more fun because you're achieving at a high level and you're not really getting too many losses. So it has a great way of, games have a great way of bringing out that flow state in people. And so games that we can do, maybe this one isn't good for right now, but we can do like the mirror drill would be a game. This is shin tag. They're just trying to touch each other's shin. So we can learn a lot of positioning, of read and react, a lot of, tactics here with this game, a lot of quickness, first step quickness, how to move my body, how to achieve a goal, right? So that one's probably out for now, but what they have are, they're called reaction belts. And so it's like a 10-foot belt. You wrap it around both players, you put a belt on, and then there's a string between them. And the string has Velcro in the middle, or the strap has Velcro in the middle. So one player would try to get away from the other player, and you have to get away hard enough to break the Velcro. So this would be something similar here. I'm going to skip. But that's a great way to distance, maybe have somebody try to get outside of a circle or something like that, right? It's a great way to distance and have some fun playing a game. One leg tag is like one of my favorites just because there's so much going on. Like we're on one leg, we're developing some of that power. It's hard for kids to get around on one leg. There's a lot of cheating that goes on in this one, by the way, so you have to watch it. But maybe this one isn't a great choice for right now, depending on where you're at in your state and all of that kind of stuff. But this is a great developmental thing because kids are learning to be a little bit more explosive. They're learning to land better. They're learning to cut with one leg, and it's just a game of tag. This one's out for right now, but laser tag is kind of a strength game. You're trying to touch your finger to your partner's shin. So again, not a great option for right now during COVID, but this is something that kids get into. They really enjoy it. And this is something if we get back to some kind of normal life, we can do this stuff. Peripheral tag is just basically, he's trying to find a target and tag it. He shouldn't be turning his head that much. This leads me to believe that he doesn't have that big visual field. You should be able to look straight ahead here. And once that hand creeps into your visual field, you tap it. So it's just hand-eye coordination, a little bit of accuracy, and widening that visual field. I think that's it. So the games, and I will talk about this implicit versus explicit. Games allow you to do more coaching, but less talking. Implicit coaching is, you're focused on the athlete. You're not really giving them that many instructions. You're giving them maybe the parameters of the game or the idea of the game, but you're not saying, okay, now you have to step your left foot here and do this with your right foot. right? You give them the reins and let them explore some of that and let them figure it out on their own. You don't have to do as much instructing. It's a better learning environment for them, and you can get all of that stuff in games. Whereas explicit coaching it's sort of like the difference between running a drill where you turn around a cone and having players like try to skate around another player. Like explicit is, okay, you go to the cone, you turn around the cone, right? And what that does is it puts a lot of work on you. It doesn't require much of the athlete. It's heavy on feedback, and it's not as durable. The kids don't learn as well in that environment as they do in the implicit coaching environment or the game environment, the game-based environment, right? So instead of giving the kids the right solutions, we should be giving kids the external idea. Like the external idea of the shin tag game would be tag his shin, and then they figure it out from there. You might be able to give some helpful hints or something like that, but if you're giving them every single move, the teaching isn't as durable and it's not as good for the athlete. So that's where gameplay, all of this is to say that games are a great way to teach, and it's fun, and it seems like it's not, because it's just fun, it's kids having fun, but if you're doing it in the right way, they're going to be learning a ton from that. Some examples of games are just, can you beat the clock? Can you get fast? Can you be faster than this guy? How many of these can you do? How far can you go? How high can you get? It's easy to turn anything into a game when you just ask little simple questions like this. Let's see how many of these you can get in 30 seconds. And that sort of puts that game play idea into it. All right. So I'm going to wrap with that. I know maybe you had some questions, and I don't know, it's tough in this environment because I am on a delay as well. So it's tough to answer questions, but if there's any that came through, I can answer. Mike, if you want to chime in here, if there's any questions. But if there's not, feel free to reach out, Brian@advantagestrength.com, and we're all over social media and all that stuff too. So I'm gonna stop my screen share and maybe hand the reins back to you, Jack, if you want them.
Thanks, Brian. All I can say is that was a really remarkable, a little over an hour. I can't imagine that any coach in Michigan wouldn't benefit from a review of the material you presented. And I just want to express my thanks. We've worked together for a number of years now. I was trying to remember how many. It's probably getting close to 10. And, it's just a real privilege to work with you. I want to thank you very much. And I look forward to keeping our relationship going and down the road. And hopefully we'll be back in person again in our coaching clinics next fall. So
well, I appreciate it, Jack. I guess one more thing here, Jack. Sorry, I'll take 30 seconds. We're set up here for a team. You can see the cones on the floor. So each player gets a cone to stand by. And you can do so many of those things. You can do the jumps in place. You can do the body weight strength training. You can even do sprints down the outside of the cone, with players separated. We can do the shuffle in the mirror and all of that kind of stuff right here in this space. So it doesn't take a lot of space. And the cones help keep the kids distanced, because otherwise they're not real prone to that. They tend to clump together, but this is set up for a team, and this is all you need. So I did just want to share that really quickly. If you're thinking about doing this stuff with your team.
It's a great add-on. And as you know, our friends in Europe do this consistently, almost every practice, indoors or outdoors. So despite COVID, I think this is something I hope our coaches will take some of this to heart and start working on making, as you said, making their players athletes first and hockey players second. I think that's a great way to wrap up our discussion tonight. So thank you again. And Michael, I think we're all done. We can turn off the YouTube feed, and great job. Again, thank you, Brian, for all you've done.
Thanks, Jack.